Grade 12, Chapter 4, Rattrap. This chapter has been penned by Selma Langolof. She was a Swedish writer. Selma's stories have been translated into many languages. This story is set in the middle of the mines of Sweden, which are rich in iron ore. The story is narrated in the manner of a fairy tale. It's a fiction, and it gives us the message that the emotions of love and acceptance can reform others. Read the meaningful story to learn about how the peddler learned the true meaning of life. The story revolves around the Rattrap seller. The Rattrap seller led a very miserable life. He could not earn much. He had to resort to thievery and begging to make both ends meet. He was alone in this world and led a miserable life. So he started knitting up various kinds of thoughts. He thought to himself that the whole world was a big red trap. Why does he think so? Read the story to find out why did the peddler think that the world is a big red trap. Once upon a time, there was a man who went around selling small red traps of fire. He made them himself at odd moments from the material he got by begging in the stores or at the big farms. So this is how to make both the ends meet. He made the red traps and sold the red traps, but he could not earn much. He moved from one place to another to sell the red traps. He did not have enough money and shelter, so every day he had to ask somebody to give him shelter. Anyhow, he tried to manage the things. No one could imagine how sad and monotonous his life was. He roamed around like a vagabond. Vagabond is a wanderer. The life of the red trap seller was very sad and boring. He was homeless, and slowly, with his heavy feet, he walked along the road, lost in his own thoughts. He had been constantly thinking about what he should do to have better life. As he used to move from one place to another, he used to keep on thinking about the red traps. And this is what made him think that the whole world, with its lands and seas, its cities and villages, was nothing but a big red trap. It had never existed for any other purpose than to set baits for people. It offered riches and joys, shelter and food, heat and clothing, exactly as the red trap offered cheese and pork. And as soon as anyone let himself be tempted to touch the bait, it closed in on him, and then everything came to an end. So thinking about the red trap all the time made him think so. Bait here means food placed on a hook to trap a rat. Here it is referred to the comforts of life which is offered to trap someone. So as the people are tempted or convinced by the materialistic pleasures of life, they get trapped in the bait, and this is how their life come to an end. The man was thinking about the red trap and suddenly a thought came to his mind. So from this we can conclude that he was very unhappy with what he experienced. The man was thinking about the red trap and suddenly he thought something like this. Now he was looking for shelter. He thought that he should relax for a while somewhere. No one in the world had ever been kind to the red trap seller. So he started thinking ill of others. It became a favorite pastime for him. During dull moments, these thoughts made him happy. So he continued with thinking ill of those who were known to him. He would imagine those people who were already trapped in the red trap of worldly things and also those who were about to get trapped in it. So his miserable condition had made him ill minded. He never wanted to harm others, but the things were not favorable, and so he kept on thinking ill about others. One dark evening, as he was trudging along the road, he caught sight of a little grey cottage by the roadside. Now, on his way, he was thinking ill about others, thinking about the world that seemed to be like a big red trap. Moving farther, he seemed to be exhausted. It was dark in the evening, and as he was trudging along the road, he caught the sight of a little grey cottage by the roadside, and so he knocked on the door to ask for shelter for the night. Nor was he refused. Instead of the sour faces which ordinarily met him, the owner, who was an old man without wife or child, was happy to get someone to talk to in his loneliness. So this is how he was welcomed by the crofter. The crofter was happy to see him. Why? Because he was alone. He had nobody to talk to, and he was talkative. So the peddler was welcomed in Crofter's house. Immediately he put the porridge pot on the fire and gave him supper. So the peddler was served supper. Then he carved off such a big slice for his tobacco roll that it was enough both for the stranger's pipe and his own. So this is how the crofter and the peddler had good time talking to each other that day. The peddler had been wandering and he was extremely tired. But when he met the crofter, he was happy. He was treated well by the crofter. Before he could think about what he should do next, he could recollect. that his life was miserable. And this is how he thought to rob. The guest was informed at once that in his days of prosperity, his host had been a crofter at Grimsby and works and had worked on the land. So here, when he met Crofter, the crofter lived a prosperous life. He had worked hard to earn his livelihood, but the peddler was unhappy with what he earned, so he thought to rob him. After doing so, he thought to escape from there. The crofter, who was no longer able to do day labor, it was his cow which supported him. Crofter worked at Ramshaw and works. He had worked on the land, but now he was unable to do the day labor, so he milked his cow and sell the milk to earn his livelihood. And this is how he had received all 30 kroner in payment. He showed the money to the peddler, and this is how the peddler thought to rob him. Kroner here is a currency of Sweden. Crofter is a person who works on a rented farm. He milks the cow and sells the milk. The Rattrap seller felt that the old man was not only liberal in sharing his forage but also his secrets. So this is how he learnt about Crofter in his life. As we read further, we learn that the stranger must have seemed incredulous for the old man. Incredulous here means unbelieving. Why he seemed to be unbelieving? For the old man got up and went to the window, took down a leather pouch which hung on a nail in the very window frame, and picked out three wrinkled 10 kroner bills. These he held up before the eyes of his guest, that is the peddler. So at first, when Crofter said that he had earned a lot of money, peddler seemed to have been staring at him. He did not believe what the crofter said, so to prove him that he had really earned the money, Crofter showed him the money that he had left in the pouch. This is how the Rattrap seller robbed the crofter. The next day, both men got up in good season. The crofter was in a hurry to milk his cow, and the other man probably thought he should not stay in bed when the head of the house had gotten up. And this is how the peddler got up. He saw Crofter busy in the farm. But half an hour later, the red-trap peddler stood again before the door. He did not try to get in, however. He only went up to the window, snatched a pen, stuck in his hand, and got hold of the pouch with the 30 kroner. This is how he robbed Crofter. Then he walked and walked without coming to the end of the wood, and finally he realized that he had only been walking around in the same part of the forest. So this is how, after robbing, he had a great escape. Now he is lost in the forest. He is trying to find his way through the forest, but still he is helpless. From one end to the another, whenever he is moving across the landscape, he feels that he had traveled the same land. After trying hard, he could hear that he was near the iron mill. He could hear the hammer strokes from an iron mill. He thought to himself that there must be people nearby. He summoned all his strength, got up, and staggered in the direction of the sound. The Remshaw ironworks, which are now closed down, were not so long ago a large plant with smelter, rolling mill, and forge. He reached near the iron mill. The iron mill was not closed down long ago. He could hear the strokes of the hammer. People seemed to have been working there. As we read further, we learn that the peddler was quite happy as he had some money in his pocket. As he walked through the forest, he reached the iron mill. He hoped to earn some more money. At this point of time, he started thinking that now he himself was caught in the trap of the world just like other people. He was fooled by the bait of money which he had stolen from the old man's house. The forest seemed like a prison full of trunks and branches. The trunks and the branches seemed to have been trapping him. It was like an impassable prison. So his experience being in the forest made him realize that he was trapped in the rat trap. It was late in December. Darkness was already descending over the forest. This increased the danger and increased also his gloom and despair. Finally, he saw no way out and he sank down on the ground, tired to death, thinking that his last moment had come. But now, as he reached the iron mill, he was hopeful. As it was the month of December, it was dark. The Remshaw Ironworks, where he heard people working, made him feel hopeful about earning money. During one of the long dark evenings just before Christmas, the master smith and his helper sat in the dark forge near the furnace waiting for the crude iron which had been put in the fire. So this is the scene where he meets the ironmaster. He is busy working with his helper. Every now and then one of them got up to stir the glowing mass with a long iron bar, returning in a few moments, dripping with perspiration. Though, as was the custom, he wore nothing but a long shirt and a pair of wooden shoes. So these people were busy working in the iron mill. Anvil here means a heavy iron block with a flat top and concave sides. Perspiration means sweat. As they were working extremely hard, they seemed to be perspiring. The blacksmiths glanced only casually and indifferently at the intruder. He looked the way people office type usually did, with a long beard, dirty red, and with a bunch of red threads dangling on his chest. The peddler, moving around with the red threads hanging on his chest, seemed to be dirty, and this is why the ironmaster looked at him. He just glanced at him. It was probably on account of all these noises that the blacksmith did not notice that a man had opened the gate and entered the forge until he stood close up to the furnace. Surely it was nothing unusual for the poor vagabonds without any better shelter. So, this is how the ironmaster thought that he had met his old acquaintance, and this is how he addressed him to be a captain, Captain von Cecil. So, Captain von Cecil, he said, the Ramsjo iron mill was owned by a very prominent ironmaster whose greatest ambition was to ship out good iron to the market. He watched both night and day to see that the work was done as well as possible. The ironmaster was very sharp, but he could not recognize the peddler. So this is how he addressed him to be the captain. He also called him Nils Olaf. The stranger had stretched himself out on the floor and lay with a piece of pig iron under his head and his head pulled down over his eyes. As soon as the young girl caught sight of him, she went up and lifted his head. So this is how the ironmaster's daughter, Elda, who was a kind and generous girl, was always ready to help others. She was very sympathetic towards the peddler. She introduced herself by saying that my name is Elda Wilminson. You may be sure, Captain, that you will be allowed to leave us just as freely as you come. Okay, so here he had come. So the speaker is trying to share that he would allow them to be in their comfort zone and he would not disturb or distract them as freely as you can, he said. Only please stay with us over Christmas Eve. So there was a warm welcome from the ironmaster and his daughter. The peddler never expected them to be so kind and generous, and this is how Hilda insisted him to stay for the Christmas Eve. Why the devil did I take that fellow's money? He thought. Now I'm sitting in the trap and will never get out of it. Why does the speaker say so? Why does the peddler feel so? He felt so because he felt sorry for what he had done. He had robbed the crofter, and he feels that he had been so unkind to him. Crofter had given him shelter and food to eat, and on the contrary, he had hurt him by betraying him. Now I am sitting in the trap and will never get out of it. So now he is feeling sorry. He could not apologize to the crofter. But here, Elda, who is warm and welcoming, makes him realize his mistake. So this is how we can say that the title of the story is Well Justified. It is not my fault, sir, he said. I never pretended to be anything but a poor trader, and I pleaded and begged to be allowed to stay in the forge. But no harm has been done. But later on, when it was time for him to accept his mistake, he confesses that it was his fault. He had made the mistake. He was not supposed to plead and beg, but he was supposed to realize his mistake and cause no harm to others. As we read further, we learn that the iron master did not like the peddler's words and decided not to call the sheriff, that is the policeman. At first, he thought that he had been cheated by the peddler because he mistakenly told and addressed him to be the captain, his old acquaintance. But peddler was a thief and not the captain. So this is why the ironmaster was upset. He thought that he was not Nils Olof, and he wanted him to be punished. But then he stopped himself because his daughter was very kind and generous, and she knew who the peddler was, and she wanted him to be forgiven. So we learn that the peddler was quite upset about what he had done to the crofter, was ready to apologize, but he could not do so. The reader's sympathy is with the peddler right from the beginning of the story. Why is this so? Is the sympathy justified? So, if you read the story carefully and try to analyze the story, you would come to a conclusion. Try to answer this question in your own words.